Good. Oh, thank you. Please be seated. It's great to be back in Escambia County. You guys have managed to steer clear of these more recent hurricanes over the last few years. I know you're very well prepared, and I'm glad things are going well here. I want to thank the sheriff for having us. We're also joined by the Surgeon General of the state of Florida, Dr. Joe Ladapo. We have Mark Wilson, is the president of the Florida Chamber of Commerce. And we have Tish Patel, who, among other things, is a local hotel owner here in Northwest Florida. So we thank you. So we're here to discuss one of the proposed constitutional amendments that are going to be on your ballot, this Amendment 3. And you're going to hear from me and then some of these other folks. My view on these amendments is you should never amend the Constitution lightly. So as a voter, your default should start as no. Whoever's proposing it has a high burden to show you or to prove to you why this would somehow be a good thing to put in a Constitution. And keep in mind, when it's in the Constitution, if things go bad, you can't. I saw some of the legislators here. You can't just tell your legislature, hey, fix it, because you can't legislate changes to a constitutional provision. So they're effectively permanent. The only way you could possibly change it is to then amend the Constitution again, which is very difficult to do, requires you go do another election, all this other stuff. So that, I think that's the right frame of mind, especially from a more conservative perspective. A lot of ideas that get put out should not be in a Constitution, period. There's certain things that make sense to be in a Constitution. For example, we have a provision in Florida, 2/3 of each house of the legislature required to raise taxes. I think that's good. Maybe you don't, but the bottom line is that clearly is something that belongs in a Constitution. Governor has a line item veto, some of these things. Just putting in policy on certain things, really shouldn't be in the Constitution to begin with. So that's just, I think, the general framework that it's appropriate to look at these. Now, this Amendment 3, it's also, I think, important to ask, where do these things come from? How did this get on your ballot? It's an interesting question because it doesn't just come out of thin air. Was this driven by citizens throughout Florida who really wanted to write this? No, it was not. This amendment was written by the CEO of a major marijuana company. And that company has spent over $100 million trying to get this passed in the state of Florida. So that's why it's there. That's why you see mailers and commercials and all this stuff, all because of a number of weed companies, but really one that's done over $100 million, traded on the Canadian Stock Exchange, so a publicly traded company. Now, here's the issue. If you're a publicly traded company, could you write an amendment and then flush $100+ million into it if it didn't mean that you would be able to monetize the hell out of it? It would be a violation of your fiduciary duty. If the CEO of the company just wrote an amendment to be good for Florida and it wasn't maximizing the company's profits, that'd be a violation of the fiduciary duty. So the whole purpose of this amendment is to create and protect a certain business model at the expense of what is good policy for the people of Florida. And here's what I say. All you see is the summary on the ballot. Now, the CEO of the weed company wrote the summary, too. This summary does not tell you what's in the amendment. The Florida Supreme Court is supposed to police that, and the summary has to be an accurate reflection. This is not, and they made a huge mistake by allowing this to be on the ballot. So you have to read. So you're not going to get the constitutional text on your ballot. You have to go online to the Secretary of State's website, and you have to basically pull this document, and it's there, and then anything that's underlined is how they're going to change your Constitution. And so what is it doing? First of all, because I've had some people, like, look, I think, and I think it's important to say, we do have legal marijuana in Florida now, okay? We have medical marijuana. People can get the cards. A lot of people have it. I see a hell of a lot of weed stores already in Florida. You ain't seen nothing yet if this passes, trust me. And so that's already there. That will be there if this is voted down. If it's voted in, you could see some underlying changes in the way that these companies operate. Well, they'll be focusing more on recreational. I don't know what that'll mean for the medical. I know there's a lot of doctors who are involved in it. I think this will be bad for that. Bottom line, if this fails, Amendment 3, medical is there. So we have that. But some people say, I don't really care what people do, and so, it's like, it seems like all this is going to let people just do what they want in the comfort of their own home. And I actually am sympathetic with that. I really don't care what people are doing with respect to weed. I don't think it's good. I would advise not, but it's like people make a lot of choices that I may not like. That's just the way, it kind of works. But that's not what this is. That's not what this amendment does. In fact, this amendment is not about freedom in two different respects. One is, it is true, they put in here that if it passes, you'll have a right to possess and smoke up to 3 ounces of marijuana, which is actually way more than California and way more than Colorado. It's about 100 joints that you would be able to do, and presumably, you could take it with you. So if you're on an elementary school campus, this is a constitutional right for you to have 3 ounces on you. I'm not sure that's really good, but here's the thing. You can possess and smoke it, but only if you buy it from these companies. You cannot grow your own under this amendment. Why not? If this is about freedom, at least like your backyard and what you do, that would be the basic building block of freedom. They don't want you to do that because they want to force business relationship with their cartel. And what they do is they create in the Constitution of Florida a big weed cartel where these incumbent companies have these special privileges where you as a Floridian would not be able to grow your own. You would have to buy it from them. And so the rights that are in here are basically about a right to engage in commercial transactions with these companies who are sponsoring the amendment. That is not free market. That is not what freedom is. But it also undermines freedom in this respect, because I think freedom means you as a Floridian have a right to not be involved with marijuana if you don't want to. So you have a right to go to our beaches, our parks. You have a right to walk down the street in downtown Pensacola and not have weed be everywhere. You shouldn't have to explain to a first grader what the smell is like you have to do in Denver and New York City and all these other places. This amendment provides no restriction at all on the public use and smoking of marijuana. And if you look what's happened in Colorado, California, New York City, talk to people about that. It's a universal complaint. But in those areas, they actually have restrictions on it. They're just not enforced, but they actually have restrictions. This has no limitation on public use. It would impact the culture of the state, the quality of life of the state. It will impact tourism 100%. And so this is far from being about freedom. It really undermines freedom. It's about protecting a corporate cartel and getting profits flowing to the companies that have sunk $100+ million into this. And maybe the most egregious thing at all, and again, the ballot summary would not tell you this. You have to actually read this amendment. They are giving themselves, the weed companies, total immunity from any civil liability. So this is their whole business. If they're acting in accordance with the section, as it relates to the acquiring, cultivating, processing, manufacturing, selling, and distributing marijuana products to adults, shall not be subject to criminal or civil liability or sanctions under Florida law. There is no qualification to that. That is a total grant of immunity. What does that mean? If they sell you defective weed and you have a seizure or something, can you sue them? No. There's no exceptions to this. If they're distributing it, because it has distribution, if they're driving weed to their dispensaries and they run over somebody, can you sue them for that? No. So this is like big pharma on steroids. This is a massive legal shield that they are getting, where they're going to be able to engage in conduct which is not in the best interest. Even if you like marijuana, they're going to be able to engage in conduct which will not have any sanction or any liability, even if they're hurting people. That is wrong. It is right. That's not good policy, period, but it is very wrong to put that in the Constitution of a state, and especially the state of Florida. So you would never know that liability, that they're immune from liability if you just read the ballot summary. You got to read the actual text of this. This is why this whole process is such a farce, because people should know what they're voting on. And to have this summary on that ballot when it totally omits that they're immune from civil liability, are you kidding me? This will cause huge, huge problems. And again, you will not be able to tell your legislator to go in and change it, because you can't change the Constitution through legislation. So this handcuffs the state of Florida to have these policies. And it's really, really inappropriate to be able to do that. So that is honestly, the chutzpah to write an amendment for yourself and put that in there. I mean, it takes a lot of gall to do that. I mean, really, are you serious? So that's what you're seeing there. Now, there's commercials saying nobody should be rotting in prison for smoking marijuana. Vote for Amendment 3. I agree with that, right? So I asked the Department of Corrections when they started making that argument, I wasn't aware that people are in prison for this. Can you look up how many? Because I would be willing to pardon them. The number of people in Florida prisons for using or possessing personal amounts of marijuana is zero. Zero. None. And if you look at marijuana offenses of people that are in, it's almost 100% where they have committed much more serious offenses. So, for example, if somebody is driving while high and they kill somebody, you can't just do a breathalyzer, so you've got to prove that they were high. Well, if they have a lot of marijuana on them, that would be proof as to them driving while high and causing the death of somebody. So, of course, you're going to charge that at that point. But in terms of personal use, people that are doing that, there's zero people in prison. And that's basically been the way Florida has operated for a long time. Now, if you think, well, maybe someday it could happen, tell your legislature to say, just doing this, if you're doing that in the private home, you will never be eligible for job. I'm fine with that. But that is not a reason to vote for this monstrosity and this horribly written amendment. So that whole thing is nonsense. Now, they'll also say, oh, if you vote for 3, you're going to get money for schools and for law enforcement. There is nothing in this amendment that provides any money for education, law enforcement, or anything. That is just totally fabricated. And haven't we learned? Remember they told us if you had a lotto, then there would never be a need. We'd have all the money we'd ever need for education. It doesn't work out that way. I think most Floridians, when they see that, I think they're like, I may have been born on a Tuesday, but not last Tuesday. I mean, I don't think most people are that gullible to think that somehow this is going to do. But here's the issue with it. Because I don't even know if the legislature would tax it. But if you tax it, it raises the price. So what does that do? Since people can use it wherever they want to, on the beaches, it will increase demand. It will increase use. It will, 100%. So the market is going to get bigger. The price will get higher. And so what happens? The black market fills the void with lower prices. The black market gets bigger. That's what happened in Colorado. That's what happened in California. Bigger black markets today than before they did it. That is so predictable that will happen in the state of Florida. So this idea that somehow, it'll be safe and regulated and you won't have a black market, that is a pile of hooey. I'd also point out we already have safe and regulated medical marijuana. So if that's what you want, you can apply for a card and get it. But this is not something that is going to lead to the elimination of a black market. And to the contrary, it will likely cause a dramatic expansion, because that's what's happened in every state that's done this. I mean, we could sit here and say we're somehow unique, but I would say, and I think a lot of people in Florida acknowledge Colorado, California, New York. I do think they do. Certainly, I found people that have traveled to those places overwhelming are like, this is not the way to go. Some Floridians that haven't been to those places may not appreciate what has happened to reduce the quality of life. But there's broad agreement that how they did it has caused huge problems. There's a lot of people in Colorado that were gung-ho for this that now will say, don't make the mistake we did. And they will say, but I think the thing to point out about Colorado, California, New York, whatever you think of them, and I think it's been a train wreck, this amendment is much worse in terms of how it's written. This is a horribly written amendment. And of course it is, because it's not about creating good public policy for the state of Florida. It's about one company recouping its investment of $100 million. Of course they're giving themselves liability. Of course they're not going to restrict public use. Of course they're not going to let you grow your own. Because all those things, if they did the opposite, it would hurt their bottom line. So whatever negative has happened in Colorado, California, New York City, expect with this in our Constitution that the negative will be much worse here in Florida. And I also think we're the #1 tourist destination in America. And the character and the quality of that will change if this is done. And then finally, I'll say, and I'll kick it over to some of our other folks, they have legal immunity that they're giving themselves. And if you look at what's happened in some of these other states, what you've seen is a big explosion in use of these products by young people. People that are not 21, not eligible to legally purchase it, but yet these products flood the streets. And what they do is they package it in ways that appeal to young people. So you think that you're getting Sour Patch Kids, and it's in like almost the same packaging, but it's really marijuana gummies or other things like that. And there's a commercial on one of the ER doctors from California is talking about what's happened since California went down this road. Huge increase in ER visits for young people going in. They're not eligible to purchase it legally, and yet somehow it's flooding, and they're using these products that are geared towards kids. So that will happen in Florida. I think the difference in Florida is they're going to have total legal immunity. I don't know how you're going to be able to realistically hold them accountable. Like, obviously, if they knowingly sell to someone under 21, we probably could, because it would probably come outside this. But if they're just doing the deceptive packaging, if they're packaging to kids, I don't think we'd be able to do anything to rein that in. So as a parent, I look at it and say, not just me and my 3, but other parents and their kids, if Amendment 3 passes, will that be better for kids in the state of Florida or no? Is there anybody that would honestly say this will be better for kids if this passes? I've not heard a single argument saying it'll be better for kids. It has not been better for kids in any other place where this has been tried. So and again, you can be for marijuana, but this is a monstrosity. This is a train wreck that they've written. And understand, I don't know, like, how Colorado, I don't know every single detail about everything they've done, but I know this will exacerbate the problems that they've already experienced. And so there's ways that you could possibly approach this that would not be this harmful. This is not it. So all being told is, I'm obviously against this. I think it's a mistake. I don't think it should have been allowed on the ballot because of how misleading it is. I don't think it's right that one company would spend $100 million to try to get itself in the Constitution. There's a whole host of reasons why. But I think and I hope you will agree with that and cast your vote accordingly. But the main thing is go into it eyes wide open. If you haven't read this, how do you justify a yes vote if you haven't read the constitutional text? Not on your ballot. You got to go and do a little bit of digging. You got to do a little bit of research. And if you're not doing that, then obviously the default should be no, unless you really have a firm understanding of why this should be in the Constitution. There's nobody that can make a credible argument as to why, if you're going to, quote, legalize weed, that only the companies should be able to sell it and you shouldn't be able to grow it. That is a corporate carve-out, a corporate giveaway. No one can make an argument as to why they should be shielded from any civil liability for their business conduct. There's no other industry in the state of Florida that has total immunity from civil liability. And in fact, we've reeled in corporate welfare since I've been governor. Disney, they had a little fiefdom, and we reeled that back because that's not good government. So no one can make that argument, and nobody can make an argument that it would be good for Florida to have rampant public use like you see in New York and Denver and in places in California. Nobody can make that argument. And so that's what you're getting when you do this amendment. And I just think it's this is not the way to do business. And I'm confident if people really understood this, I don't think it would have a prayer. But I'll tell you, I've had a lot of people come up to me and they're like, well, I saw this. Are the sheriffs for it? I'm like, no. Like, well, I saw a sheriff saying he was for it on TV. I was like, well, you should figure out why they're doing that, because I guarantee you there's more to that story. But bottom line is, you have the amendment. They don't want to give it to you on your ballot. They have a summary, which is inaccurate. But here it is. So eyes wide open on this, and I would just say do what you think is best for the future of the state of Florida. Okay, we're going to hit some of our guests, and then maybe have a little discussion after that. Okay, so joining me to talk about some of these issues is the Surgeon General of the state of Florida, Dr. Joseph Ladapo.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy to be here with you guys this morning, and I'm happy to be with the governor and talking about this issue. And, you know, there are, I'm just thinking here, I didn't get enough sleep last night, guys, so I'm not all the systems are online yet. But, so I've been in this job now for 3 years as Surgeon General. I was a professor and practiced medicine at UCLA before I came here. And, you know, and I've enjoyed my job. You know, we've done a lot of fun stuff over the last 3 years. I think a lot of things that have been very important, and I've certainly felt that they've been very important, and I've been really just really been warmed by the kind of feedback we've gotten in terms of how important some of the things that we've done have been to other people. And you know, we've had a lot of fun. And one of the things that motivates me, and I'm usually, you know, whatever's happening, I'm usually just very happy with it, and you know, just roll with the punches and do what we can. But one of the things that motivates me that does get under my skin a lot is when people are taken advantage of. And that really bothers me. I know it bothers the governor too. That's why he's fighting so hard and, you know, making these trips to educate Floridians about what's going on. And this is another example, and we saw many over the last few years, right? Things about, well, take the vaccine, it'll protect other people, you know, and that wasn't true. You know, put masks on your kids, that's how you're going to save things and stop pandemics. That wasn't true. And people who said those things, who were scientists, knew that the data didn't support what they were saying. And it bothered me a lot because they were taking advantage of people's ignorance or people's shortness of knowledge. And this is another example of that. So the notion of, you know, not criminalizing something like marijuana use is very popular, right? And frankly, I'm completely on board with that, right? You do stuff, I mean, I'd rather people not use drugs for other reasons related to just how, you know, drugs diminish us. That's just, it's a fact. They snuff out our light, they diminish our power, our potency as human beings, our ability to connect with other people. So I'd rather people not use them. But if people were to use drugs privately in their homes, not affecting other people, who's got a problem with that? Very few people have a problem with that. And that sentiment, that you know, that compassion, that interest in, you know, other people being allowed to live their lives in the way they want to live their lives is what this, you know, this sort of policy proposal that we're talking about is taking advantage of. Because that's the mirage that's being held in people's minds. I was talking just the other night to one of my neighbors who is, you know, he's as hardcore Republican as you can imagine. I mean, the guy is, you know, ravenously Republican. And he lives in my neighborhood down in South Pasadena in St. Pete. And he was all in for it. And he's all in because of that notion, right? That appeals to our, you know, interest in letting people, to the extent possible, do what they want with their lives. The big problem is that the people are being preyed upon. people's consciousness, in terms of their assumptions and their beliefs about this, are being preyed upon, because that is not what they are voting on. They are voting on a monstrosity. It is grotesque, the language that is, that's actually behind what folks are voting on. And the language is completely the opposite. It's not about freedom, it's about enslavement. And it's enslavement to companies. And it's the worst kind, because not only does what's being proposed limit people, people think, oh, I'll be able to grow it, and we can have a party and people can come over. That's not what people are voting on. That's not what the policy proposes. The policy explicitly states that you come to me to buy it, right? There are people who can sell it. There are companies you can sell it. It's not about you being free to do what you want. And they're preying on people's conscious, people's assumptions about what it means to decriminalize. And then, just to add insult to injury and really rub the salt into the wounds, there's language about immunity, legal immunity. Are you kidding me? I mean, if that thing were printed on paper, it would probably light on fire. It's just spontaneous combustion. It's just so imbued with just the very worst possible sentiments and energy. I mean, it is completely grotesque. And here people are, like my good neighbor, rabid Republican. I mean, he's like, he is very hardcore. He's a great guy. But, my friend, and I'm thinking about, I'm going to give him a call, and I usually don't do this, but it bothers me to my core to see people be taken advantage of. It just bothers me to my very being. And, so you've had, it is truly grotesque, right? I'm gonna wave a freedom flag. You're gonna smile because we love freedom. We all love freedom. But really the details are that, it is enslavement. You're gonna be trapped in a relationship with me if you want to do it this way. And it's gonna be a one-sided relationship, because if you have any problems, you're on your own. It is so disgusting. And I think the governor said the chutzpah. I mean, I don't know. How do you write something like that and look at people in the eye, and walk around and hold your head up, right? How can you do that? Where's the humanity? So it bothers me, and I was really happy to come with the governor and his wife, the First Lady, to talk about some of the issues here. And, frankly, I really hope that people proselytize this, that people share with their neighbors and their friends what the facts are. Because so many of us, most of us, even me, before, frankly, I heard the governor talking about it, I was living in the mirage. Freedom, people get to grow it, do what they want. No, it's not that at all. It's not. That's what's being sold, but it's not that at all. And then on the health side, I'd mentioned already that I'm not a fan of people using drugs for various reasons, but there's a lot of objective health information that people should also know about. So one thing that's important to know is that when you look at states, because we're not the first state that has faced this, been at this junction, when you look at states that have done this in the past, there's research, there's data about the results in these states. And when you look at that, one of the things you see is that it clearly increases addiction. People we grew up thinking, marijuana is like peace, love, all that good stuff. But the marijuana that people were smoking decades ago is not the marijuana that's available now. The marijuana that's available now has much higher levels of THC, and heaven knows what else these guys are doing when they've been sort of specializing the type of crop that grows and they sell. So addiction is absolutely a thing that is fairly common with marijuana that's used and states that have enacted policies like this. It's totally a thing, and it's not pretty. I mean, it's almost ironic that we'd be talking about policies that encourage drug use, considering all the carnage that every single person just about has either been directly or indirectly affected by the addiction that we've seen with opioids, right? That, by the way, my colleagues as physicians helped bring into creation. You know, I mean, we blame the pharma companies plenty, and they certainly bear a lot of responsibility, but it didn't happen by accident. Just like even this, people doing things that, you know, that are against their best judgment, were they to actually think about what it was that they were doing, isn't happening accidentally. Another important thing on the health side that parents should totally know is that the evidence is very strong, and I think frankly conclusive, that marijuana use increases the incidence of schizophrenia in young people. And it's much worse in boys than girls. 200%, 300%, 400% increased risk of schizophrenia. Huge increases. These findings, it's been shown in Denmark, in countries in Scandinavia. It's been shown in the United States. It's been shown in other countries. It's a consistent finding. It's worse in boys than girls. It clearly is a risk, and even the New York Times, these data have been available for over 10 years, but even the New York Times now is writing about it and warning parents. You know, they had an article about a year ago, they had another one about a week or two ago talking about this. Other things, car fatalities. There's like no question. You look at the states that have encouraged this, that have passed sort of legislation like this, it increases fatalities. I mean, and it's going to, right? You know, people are gonna use a substance. Sometimes they're gonna get behind the wheel, and sometimes, tragically, people are gonna get hurt because of that. So that's another thing you can count on. And then the last health thing that I'll mention, that I was watching an interview last night, and there was a woman there. I think she's the president of one of these companies, and she was showing like this gummy, and she was saying, oh, you know, this gummy's fine, kids are not going to be into it, it's not shaped like a beer, you know, it's not shaped in some playful way for kids. I was thinking, do you not have kids? I mean, do you not have kids? Just, you know, when a kid sees something that looks like a gummy, does that kid go look in and see whether it's shaped like a star, or does it just look like a gummy, right? It's just, I mean, I'm just thinking here, I don't know if she has children or not. I've never met her. I hope she doesn't. But kids, you know, kids are not going to distinguish gummies that are round and don't have any special characteristics from gummies that, you know, that are shaped like little beers. So it will increase the incidence of that. That's already gone up in Florida over the last several years in terms of kids, unfortunately, accidentally getting poisoned from marijuana, from, you know, cookies, brownies, or candy. And that would, you know, you can expect that would get worse. So for so many reasons, you know, please proselytize, go out, tell people, it's just data. It's like the facts, right? The words that are behind this, like the thing that people are going to be looking at in a few weeks. I mean, the words speak for themselves, okay? That thing will like literally catch on fire if they printed it and put it in front of people. It is so bad and disgusting and just, you know, from another dimension. So, you know, God bless you guys, and thank you.
All right, thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. Okay, we have our host here from Escambia County, Sheriff Chip Simmons.
Thank you, Governor. You know, I'm not going to get into the stuff that the governor brought up, because he obviously has been talking to sheriffs and police chiefs throughout the country, throughout the state certainly. I do want to talk about something that was commented on. There's a couple sheriffs that are getting out there and saying that this is going to be a good thing. I will tell you that the Florida Sheriff's Association, we all had a meeting and we all talked about that, and we all that I noticed said we're going to say no on Amendment 3. Now all of a sudden we have a couple sheriffs and they can do it based upon what they see. But there's this thought that if they approve it, that deputies will be free to do other stuff, to handle murderers and rapists and all that sort of thing. I will tell you that small marijuana, and this is getting to the point that I believe the governor made, small marijuana is not a priority here at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office. We do not spend an inordinate amount of time stopping people for marijuana. In fact, I'll go further than that. None of our canines are trained to alert on marijuana. We haven't been for a couple of years. So we're not stopping cars and oh my gosh, there's marijuana, and we're going to put them in prison, as the governor alluded to. That's not happening. All of that is not true. Certainly not true here in Escambia County. Our priority is fentanyl and methamphetamine. It is not misdemeanor marijuana. Now, larger marijuana is true. There's some gun violence associated with it, but that's not what they're talking about. They're thinking that this is safe marijuana. And if you know anything about the drug trade and how people are buying and selling and using, they continue to add more and more and more to it. Ultimately, they'll experiment with something that'll end up being fentanyl, and there will be an overdose. So I just want to make sure that you understand that if you hear that it'll free up time for law enforcement officers, that is not the case. Our deputies are already freed up to prioritize on fentanyl. Second thing I want to talk about is the kids. And again, some of these things were alluded to. When I'm driving down the street and something happens, I get a text from our SRO, school resource officers, that says, hey, something's going on. This is an event that's taking place. And I get a message like this. The message says, middle school student, high on marijuana gummies, EMS is on the scene. So if I have to explain that, I will. Basically, there's having a child have an adverse reaction to likely a gummy, and EMS, or emergency medical services, is on the scene. Let me give you another one, so you don't think, oh, that's just one out of not very many. But recently, a middle school, this is another text I get. 14 students experienced negative effects of marijuana edible gummies. All sought treatment, some by their parents and some by ambulance. They were experiencing difficulties breathing, and many having very much trouble breathing. These are the messages that I get during a regular work day, because these kids are in school. These are all middle school kids. So this happened to be at a middle school that I was nearby. Me and my chief deputy, we drove by there, and what do we see in the front of this middle school? We see 14 middle school students, most of them females. Some of them were being loaded into an ambulance. Some of them had parents that had pulled up in tears, running towards their kids, and there were two middle school kids on a table or a gurney, and just crying their eyes out because they have no idea what's happening to them. This is not uncommon. These are just two of the messages that I've received. 114, one kid. This is what we're talking about. I think the doctors talk about you don't have to look like bears or stars or planets or something. They just think it looks like candy. At the younger ages, at the middle school ages, there's a little bit of an experimental thing there, and there's some peer pressure there. And I think that this is a problem for us. It's a problem for you. It's a problem for every community. Because if this is approved, you think this is going to be alleviated? No. This is going to be tenfold, 100-fold. There's going to be more edible gummies. There's going to be more marijuana at houses where kids can take that to school and share that with other students. And ultimately, this can impair them and cause them some what I understand to be lifelong situations. I will just lastly tell you, because a lot of stuff has been gone over by the governor and the doctor there. I've spoken to many law enforcement professionals in Colorado and in California. We have a lot of conferences, and they all, when I ask, well, we have this on the amendment, what do you think? And all of them shake their head no. Do not let it happen. None of them say that passage of this type of legislation or this type of an amendment makes their community better. Our community will not be better. Now, I haven't gotten out and said I'm all against this. I haven't held signs up, but I can tell you what I see. I see this, and when I'm asked a question, am I support of Amendment 3, the answer based upon what I know, based upon what I see, based upon what I hear, is an absolute no. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, very good. And I think that's Sheriff made an important point, because this is another one of these kind of canards that gets thrown out there. We have the best law enforcement in the country in Florida. We're the best law and order state. We recruit people, come from all over the country to be able to work. You've given out bonuses that we did and all this stuff. And the notion that somehow they're not focused on what matters, honestly, it's insulting to say that, oh, pass Amendment 3 because law enforcement's focusing on somebody smoking some joint in their house. That's not what they do. No one's in prison for that. So it is not going to do, it's going to make their job probably more difficult, because it's going to change all these different things. There's going to be more crashes they're going to have to respond to. There's going to be all these other things. But the notion that law enforcement in Florida is somehow focused on the wrong things. That is not true. That's part of the reason we have lower crime rate, because they're focused on the right things. So that's a total canard, and I don't think Escambia County is any different than anywhere else in the state of Florida. You know, they're focusing on the things that make the difference for the community, and we don't have people in our prison system just simply for using marijuana. Okay, Florida Chamber of Commerce, Mark Wilson.
All right. Well, Governor, thank you very much for being here. And Doctor, thank you for your words, too. So I'm Mark Wilson. I serve as president of Florida's Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here to give perspective of why this is so bad for local businesses all over Florida. And Governor, on behalf of all of us, I want to thank you and First Lady DeSantis for you to go all over Florida and actually try to protect this from Amendment 3. So many governors and mayors across the country have spoken out against this after it passed. And they're all warning us not to do it. And for you to have the courage to get in front of this, this is like a book cover where everyone loves the sound of the book cover, but what we're now learning is what's on the inside is absolutely terrible. There's not a single good reason to be in favor of this. And for the First Lady to go around and talk about moms and dads, who wants to bring their kid to a park and have to leave the park because it smells like marijuana, only to go to a local restaurant and have the restaurant smell like marijuana. And then you're going to complain to the restaurant owner, hey, do something about this. You know what? They're not going to be able to call the sheriff. They're not going to be able to ask the people to leave. Because if Amendment 3 passes, that's what happens in Florida. So in my role at the Florida Chamber, we have companies that are participants in every county of Florida. And I got to tell you, our economy's growing. Just since the governor's been in office, our economy's grown 30%. Do you know Florida is now the 15th largest economy in the world, $1.7 trillion? And right here in Pensacola, you need to generate 13,000 new jobs by 2030. And so when it comes to what's best for families, we've already heard that today. There is nothing in this for families. It's only negative for families in this part of Florida and all of Florida, right? What about local businesses? We have 10 million people in Florida who work. Local businesses are what makes the economy work. Local businesses are going to be powerless to do anything about this, right? There's a reason the people on the billboards, the lawyers on the billboards love this, and it's because law enforcement and local businesses aren't going to be able to do anything about this. This is a field day for the lawyers, and the governor talked about all the challenges with this. But here's the deal. The only people who benefit from Amendment 3 are the people who grow drugs and sell drugs. All 23 million of the rest of us, we all lose if Amendment 3 passes. So the people that have paid over $100 million to put this on the ballot, the lies that are in the language, the lies that they're trying to trick all of you. And I know it's the fall and I know it's Halloween. This is the biggest trick going on in Florida right now. They want you to believe one thing, and they're hoping we're all too stupid to read the language and see what's in it. So only 3 states in the country have passed this dumb idea by more than 60%. And we all need to work together to make sure that Florida is not the 4th state to fall victim to this really stupid idea. This is horrible for families. It's horrible for safety in our communities. And it's horrible for local businesses all over Florida. And the Florida Chamber is proud to stand here and ask you all to vote no on Amendment 3. We've got a good thing going in Florida. Our economy's growing, and we need to keep that going. We don't need to put things in our way that are going to slow us down and cause people to leave here like they are Colorado and others. Last thing I'd like to say, Governor, is I've chaired our National Association of State Chambers, which means I know every single state chamber president in the country, and I have called almost everyone or met with the states that have passed this. Talked to the Colorado Chamber president just this morning. Every single one of them has said, this sounded like a good idea, horrible idea, stop it while you can. And in the case of Colorado, they all thought they were going to bring in a lot of money. They now have state agencies trying to figure out what are they going to do because the money didn't materialize. This is a total gimmick. It's a total scam. We need to vote no on Amendment 3.
Thank you. And it's interesting, we, to have 30% GDP growth just since I took over in 2019, that's way more than the nation as a whole, not even close. And they even put out, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, this is Biden's agency, even put out 2023, what was the state that was the recipient of the most business relocations of all 50 states? We were. State of Florida, people moving businesses here. Who were some of the states that had the most businesses leaving? Places like California. And that's been true, you know, in the last 4 or 5 years. You see they've hemorrhaged businesses. We've gained businesses. That means more opportunities for people. That means, honestly, like, you know, these hurricanes we do. And people are like, okay, well, why does Florida do it like that? And how come North Carolina couldn't? Or how come that? And I think there's a whole host of reasons. But one of the things we're able to do, you know, we're flush with resources. We've got massive surplus. I created, with the legislature, we created a disaster response fund every year. We have money there. So we can bring in these linemen and house them and feed them so they get people's power back on quick. We can make sure that we're doing things, you know, that we need to help people stabilize after a storm hits. We're now doing things. I just gave $1 million to help repair the marinas in Steinhatchee, great fishing community. So we're able to do because we're a place people want to be. They want to invest. They want to do well. And that means you don't have to worry about, like, we have no income tax. We'll never have, there's no need to ever have one in Florida. Like, we're flush by not taxing people on income, but because the economy's strong. And that's been very true. I don't want to oversell, because I think there's a lot of factors that go into the economic differences in the states. There's a whole host of policies, regulatory policy, tax policy, education, all that. But the states that have hemorrhaged have typically done bad policies. And I do think that this issue of the drugs is a part. I don't think it's the main, but I think it contributes to why businesses have left some of those other areas. I can tell you, I've talked to families who've moved to Florida to escape places like Manhattan and whatever. And the funny thing is, a lot of these people are more liberal on drugs, but they're just like, it's just overwhelming. It's everywhere. There's no restriction. There's no time, place, and manner. And you're trying to raise kids, and you're walking down the street, and it's not good. So we've approached it well from a business perspective, law and order perspective, everything. And I think this amendment, it would make major changes. That's the thing. I think, obviously, most people in Florida are not using marijuana, and although use would increase if this passes, most people still probably wouldn't do it. So I think there may be some segment voters like, well, you know, I don't really care. Just let them do what they want. But it will, you may not be interested in the weed, but it's going to be interested in you. It is going to be, this will impact your life because of how this amendment's written and how you're going to see it be used rampantly in public. And it will have effects on economic vitality, all these other things. You just bet your bottom dollar, you know, that will be the case. Okay, speaking to the tourism and some of the other business issues, we have Tish Patel who's with us. So why don't you go ahead?
Hey, thank you, Governor. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for saving the best for last. Greatly appreciate you coming to Pensacola, Escambia County, and actually sharing this information. I was already against it just from a hotel and tourism point of view, but didn't know the details that you shared today. And I think it's important because, again, we all have folks we know that are like, oh, it's good, it's legalized, people won't go to jail for it. It's going to raise taxes. We're going to make more money for the sheriff's department and the schools. And I think a lot of what you said today, even I didn't know. And like you said, you have to go digging for it. So I know on the tourism side for Escambia County, Pensacola Beach, and for that matter, the entire state of Florida, we're known as a family-friendly destination. And I think for me, when I'm out, and if we're somewhere in something like marijuana, you walk through it, your kids are kind of like, what is that smell? And you know, like many years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, we were walking, and my son smelled something, and I told him, I said, I think it's poop. And he was like, man, that stinks. And so we kind of kept walking. Fast forward to a couple years ago, we're walking, and somebody's smoking, and he's like, he's got a poop cigarette. And I said, shh, you know, and you know, he remembered the smell, but I didn't realize what I had told him, that, hey, that's poop, and then we're walking anyway. But so to me, it's a problem. For tourism, you know, we got Disney World, we got the beaches. Folks love coming to Florida because we are a family-friendly destination. I think it's a huge problem. Another big issue to me is we all know drugs is we have a pandemic in America, and this to me is like a starter drug. If we are now going to legalize the starter drug, it's a problem because I know how it is for me, and Governor, you have young kids. We try to put our kids with parents of other who think like us, and we all know that your kids are a byproduct of the 5 or 6 people they hang out with. So you're always kind of scared, and you're like, hey, who's your friends, and what do they do? And kind of like what Chip Simmons said today, where 14 kids, ate some gummies, and many of them may not know that, hey, this is illegal or this is a drug, and now we're going to legalize this and make it easy for people to get, for kids to get. I think it's a huge problem even further down the line when they get older. If they started at a young age with something like this, I think it's detrimental to us, and I think it's important. And I think I'm glad and I'm thankful that you came here and took the time to teach us all what this means and how detrimental it can be.
Sure. And, I remember, there's a function in Las Vegas every year for the Republican Jewish Coalition, and I have spoken at it for many years, but I remember distinctly, this was several years ago, maybe after the 2020 election, maybe 22, where, you would go and it would always be at the Venetian, which is a great hotel. I don't really do the gambling, but they've got great restaurants, everything. And so, I'd go, I'd speak, I'd stay a night, come back. Once Nevada did the weed, I'm going, this is a beautiful hotel, and I'm walking down the hallway to my room, and the stench, it was really, really noticeable. And so, the issue would be okay, if I have a choice to make, is that the hotel experience that I want, or would I rather have one where I don't have that? And I think a lot of people would choose not to have that. So I do think it's going to impact tourism, and I think business owners have kind of wise to the language of this, because some people say, well, you know what, if people want to use it at home, I'm not going to let them use it in my hotel. I'm not going to let them use it in my restaurant. You got to read this. You got to read how this is structured. It is not going to be where you can just say no. It is not going to be where that's going to happen, because no one can face a sanction for smoking it. And so if you're doing it, there's no sanctions, no civil liability, and no criminal. And so how does it get enforced? And what I would say, what law enforcement will likely do is just say, even if there is some, hey, they've said it's a right, we're never gonna do anything. And I don't think you're gonna see help with law enforcement. I think that's part of the reason why it runs rampant in the states that have restrictions on public use, because it's just the enforceability is no. So there would be no realistic way, even if it did restrict public use, to do so. So people's private businesses and stuff, you will absolutely be impacted. I don't think there's any question. I think that's been true everywhere that's done it. So eyes wide open on this. They don't want you to read the actual text of the amendment. They want you to read the summary. The summary does not tell you everything you need to know. This is not the way to do business generally, where it's on like this. Voters should have the whole thing there for them to be able to do. That's not how it's going to be in November 5th, but nevertheless, eyes wide open. And I would say, when you're talking to friends, families, neighbors, just if they're on the fence on this, or even if they're planning on voting for it, just educate them on this. Because I don't think a lot of people honestly would go for this. The way they get to 60 is people not reading this. There's just too much bad stuff in here for it to get 60%. And I know they're doing a lot of spending. They're sending people mail. They're doing all this. But the reality is that's just trying to paper over the real serious problems with an amendment that's horribly written and is not written to benefit the state of Florida. It's to benefit the companies that are sponsoring it. That's just the truth. Why else would one company spend $100 million if it wasn't anything in it for them? That would be a violation of their fiduciary obligation of their shareholders if there wasn't anything in it for them. So that's why it's there. Wouldn't be good for Florida. And my thing is if everyone honestly understood every provision and this is still something people wanted, I would be disappointed, but it is what it is, right? But, my fear would be this passes a year from now, you got all these, I didn't know it was going to do that. I didn't know. I didn't know. I wish we wouldn't do it. And that's been the truth in every other state that's gone down this road. They've had major buyer's remorse. So this handcuffs the state in the Constitution. So you can't just fix it, in the next legislative session. This would be permanent. Effectively, the chance of ever tweaking it is virtually zero, because you'd have to amend the Constitution again. So eyes wide open, and unless you're 100% sure this is good policy, you should vote no. They have the burden to convince you. If you have any doubts, if there's anything in the amendment you don't understand, any term that they haven't defined, any consequence that you haven't seen flushed out, you err on the side of preserving the Constitution, not adding more things in it, especially when you know that this was written by the CEO of one weed company that stands to benefit on the backs of Floridians. Okay, it's been great to be here. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.